I'm going to tell you today something about corporations and startups. So my first question to you is, how many people work in a corporation in the room? Well, you're going to learn something. How many people work in a startup? How many people? What do the other guys do? Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon, Sawadee Kap. My name is Bart Bellers. So if you don't know me, I'm from Belgium, that's the land of beer and chocolates. I'm happily married. I have two sons, 16 and 19 years old, and my passion is startups. The last 14 years, I worked for the market leader in travel tech, Amadeus. And I held executive positions in innovation, business development, and corporate strategy. I worked there with my own company, Atum Consulting, as an external advisor. And between 2015 and 2016, I launched Amadeus Next. Amadeus Next has grown into the leading travel tech community in Asia Pacific. And after that, I was called to go back to Madrid, to the headquarters, where I prepared the transition to a global startup program. And during these years, I came in close contact with hundreds of startups throughout the entire global startup ecosystem. I met a couple of key players in New York, in the Valley, Berlin, Barcelona, and of course here in Asia. And I was really privileged to be able to experience firsthand how the passion of startups, or of entrepreneurs, and the expertise and knowledge of a big corporation and multiple corporations can truly move the needle. Today, I will share with you some of those insights. Now, what is important is that last Friday, I decided to leave Amadeus, because that experience over the last 3 years inspired me so much to be able to think different and do it. So I came back here to Bangkok because I saw that there is a possibility to really help startups expedite quicker in travel tech. Now, the thing that inspired me, this is what I'm going to tell you about today. And I call it the logic of Yoda. If there is one thing, one message that I want you to take home, one soundbite that I want you to take home with you today, that is that a partnership between corporations and startups can only succeed if both parties go all in. Just do it. You do it or you don't. There is no such a thing as a try. Thinking different is not good enough. You also have to act upon it. You have to step out of your comfort zone. I guess, and I hope that everybody knows this guy. Yeah? Okay, luckily. All right. Now, a partnership between startups and corporations is really all about learning. But the thing here is that each party will take its turn to be the teacher or the student. What kills a big corporation is not necessarily its competition. It's really their success. Complacency is their biggest enemy. So they have to acknowledge that they don't know it all. On the other hand, I've seen many startups that were so fixated on their own idea. They were not willing to listen to the experts. And at a certain moment, when you explain them, hey, why don't you move into this space from B to C to B to B? They were not willing to listen. At that moment, startups, you need to listen to the corporate expert. Now, like in any good relation, like in any good partnership, it's important that everybody brings something to the table. 70% of all the corporations do something and want to do something with startups, but not all of them are successful. A lot of the time, it is so-called window dressing, some kind of innovation theater, a way for corporate managers to position themselves as being innovative, and maybe in the beginning I was one of them. And it provides definitely some good PR and gives them also, at best, some insights in market trends and maybe a bunch of UIDs. The thing that I've learned, and the reason why the Amadeus Next community was successful, is that corporations need to step away from thinking, what's in it for me? How does it improve my bottom line? Because the short answer is, it doesn't. A corporation working with a startup, that doesn't improve the bottom line, at least not at the short term, not in the next budget period. And when corporations do that, something very, very nice happens. And I have the feeling, and I was told by the ecosystem that it happened to Amadeus, and to me as well, is that at that moment you become part of the in-crowd. A selected group of corporations that are very highly respected by the ecosystem. Not for the money they have, but for the value they bring. Now, startups, listen if you're being told. If corporate experts are telling you and giving you advice, don't be arrogant. Show some respect for the decades of industry knowledge and insights and expertise. You know, one of the reasons that corporations still exist is because they have been perfecting their business for multiple decades. That means they have made many, many, many mistakes. But it also means they found a lot of solutions. Learn from these mistakes. So too many times I've seen these startups that were so fixated on their own idea, on their own little vision of becoming the next Uber for X, the Airbnb for Y, that they really didn't take into account the expertise and the advice of these experts. So what happened? The only thing, they wasted a lot of time. Because 8 months later, they came back to me or to my team and saying, we should have listened to you 8 months ago. You were right. So the only thing, they wasted a lot of time and ultimately had to pivot to go into the right direction. Now, what is important between the startup and corporations partnership is that you acknowledge the differences that you have, that you try to understand each other's needs. Now, that's the problem, because the needs are not always clear. One thing corporations have learned from the likes of a BlackBerry, of Nokia, or Kodak, is that innovation has a huge, huge impact on their bottom line and on their business, on the future of their business. Okay? The problem that they face, however, is that they don't see it coming. How is it possible that a company like Kodak, you know, Kodak invented the digital camera. How is it possible that they did not see it coming? They got disrupted. It was right under their nose. The main reason for that is that corporations, once they have customers, they serve their customers, they become bigger, maybe market leaders, they have a business to protect. And then something strange happens. These innovative companies that were really, I mean, Kodak was at the verge of an entire industry. These innovative companies start looking inside rather than looking what is happening on the outside. And then this happens. Inside the building, there is no, I had to do this, sorry, I had to do it. It wasn't really scary, was it? Inside the building, there is no escape, okay? The dark side of the force is really too strong. And what I mean with the dark side within a corporation, the operational processes that are there to execute the business model, the legal policies for security, and the endless meetings to just find that one person that is able to say no. Looking inside results in the fact that most corporate innovation is incremental. They're building on the strengths of their core business, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars in improving their existing products, their existing businesses, for their existing customers. Now, the problem that corporations face is that all these problems, all these processes are tuned to execute a business model. the same processes you cannot use to search for a new one. Now, what happens? By the way, I see that it's not really very nicely displayed, but okay. What happens if your existing business suddenly changes, like it did in the case of Kodak? The business of Kodak was about taking pictures to preserve your memories for yourself. Digital, analog film. That business changed from one day to another into taking pictures to share with your friends. They did not see this coming. They wanted to preserve the analog film, and by the time the company really embraced digital, they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. It was too late. And ultimately, and this is one of the 45 buildings at the historical Eastman Kodak complex, they had to destroy these buildings because the buildings were built around the technology that became obsolete. Now, startups don't think that it's technology that kills corporations. It doesn't. Corporations are perfectly capable of building the same technology as you are. The problem that corporations have is when they have that technology, they can't do something with it. They're not always allowed to do it. A startup can do anything. A corporation can do anything that is legal. The force really to protect their existing business is much, much, much stronger than the force to develop a new technology. So startups look at your technology as an enabler, not as a mean to itself. Okay. Everybody still with me? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm happy. And now that you know that why corporations work with startups, why startups and what they need to do, I mean, well, why don't we start? Well, there are some basics. There are some basics that corporations and startups need to do in order to make it successful. And for corporations, I mean, and I'm not going to go into detail of all of these. You can find a lot of that on the internet, a lot of it being said. It's about finding the support of your C-level, doing a company-wide communication, putting everything in place to really open your technology, and definitely don't be complacent. Startups, make sure you have a minimum viable product, at least. The idea or even a prototype is really not good enough. Corporations want to really test it immediately. And don't be arrogant and listen to the advice, right? These are just some bases. Now, even if you have all of that in place, then it's not done yet. What I've learned, and I've learned it here in Asia, but I've also validated it when I was in the Valley with players like Rocket Space, with players like Interwest Partners, I mean, Plug and Play, etc., is that both corporations and startups need to forget what they have ever learned in order to work together. And that's probably the most important reason why Amadeus Next was successful. We were able, or at least I asked the board to be able, to work like a startup. And the easiest way to do that is if you tell your CFO, if they ask how much money do you need, to say nothing. First of all, you always get an approval. And secondly, and that's very important, if you don't ask for a budget to start it with, to start small, you don't get all the sharks around it that want to control part of that budget. Now, working like a startup doesn't really mean dressing yourself up in jeans. It didn't really mean an open office space, although we had it, or a PlayStation. Too bad we didn't have that. It really meant trying to understand how startups worked. Investigating, learning, practicing the lean startup methodology, getting out of our building, validating it with VCs, with startups, with the entire ecosystem. What is the thing that we need to bring as a corporation? Failing and iterating your solutions. And also The good thing is we didn't really have to abide by the rules of the corporation. Not exactly true, but my team was vigilant enough to sometimes break those rules, and that was key to be successful. Now, one of the things you have to learn is that size does not matter. As a startup, forget it. Don't go for the biggest corporation, because the size might be the one thing that really inhibits them from doing exactly what you are doing. It's not because you, as a startup, are lean and can fail about anything that a corporation can. They cannot. They have all these processes in place. Most of these are in place because corporations, they cannot fail. Because if they fail, it harms their customers. And when it harms their customers, it touches their bottom line. And it harms their brand. And corporations, don't think about startups as little bugs. Bugs can kill, you know. Be humble. Accept that you can do it all. Search for new technology together with startups, for new businesses. And maybe even search for those things that you are probably not allowed to search for. And I'm using, throughout the presentation, the example of Kodak. Anybody knows what the board of Kodak said when they were presented with the digital camera somewhere in the 70s? No? Cute, but don't tell anyone. Because nobody will ever look at pictures on a television screen. So they were not allowed to pursue it anymore. And of course, startups, yes, it will take time. And time is your most precious resource, I know it, okay? The end of the runway. But corporations, they operate at scale, and you cannot simply steer a tanker like a speedboat. So to take it into account, to really try to understand what is happening, understand the timelines, talk with your corporation. What are the expected timelines? Take it into account, yeah? Be persistent. I'm not saying you have to wait. Be persistent, resilient when you interact with corporations, but take into account that timelines may change. And sometimes there are valid reasons for that. And if there are valid reasons, communicate. Make it clear. Make it transparent as a corporation. Yeah? If your company cannot really move quicker, explain the startup why. Maybe they learn something from it. If you know it's going to be difficult to open up a certain technology, do not make the promise that you cannot uphold. And also startups need to communicate better. They need to understand what a corporation wants. Not necessarily what they wanted or what they were doing before, but where they're going to, so that they can adapt their pitches to better provide solutions to a corporation. How they can help them. So also startups, be honest. And this is my favorite slide. I always wanted to be Han Solo, okay? If you're gonna do, and whatever processes, whatever partnership, whatever paper contracts you put in place between startups and corporations, look for the champion, the maverick, the misfit that is going to challenge the status quo. And this applies for the startup looking it inside the corporation, but this also applies for the corporation. Put your maverick in front of the startup, because this person will not be the one who is asking, how much business did you make? What is the average improvement of our bottom line? They will ask, what is the real value you can bring? They will get you. And most important, they will fight your fight. They will bend the rules and ultimately make the partnership successful. And then it's all about faith, right? Show a little faith. Most of the time, corporations, well, or startups, they don't really believe that they're going to make a difference. It's more a try, and I'm coming back to the first slide. It's that belief, that vision that will drive you really forward. Have the faith that you can make the difference. And if it doesn't work at first, do it again, 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 and again. Because ultimately, I'm giving one example. ultimately you might find a unique advantage. There was one startup that wanted to have access to the departure control of an airline. You can imagine that an airline doesn't really want a team of 5 people hampering with their departure control. It took us a while to get it done. We tried again and again. And maybe they would have given up. Well, they didn't. Nor did Amadeus give up. And ultimately, we gave the access. That startup has now a unique advantage versus any other startups in the world. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you have to accept that it failed. Learn, move on, try something different, pivot or persevere. If it fails because you did not pick the right corporate, because they were not flexible enough to adapt, but you still believe in the vision, find another one. If it fails because your startup was not scalable, because it wasn't the right team, or maybe the technology that they had wasn't suited for it, find another one. But if it fails because you did do the pilot, or the 2 pilots, or the 3 pilots together with the corporation, with their end customers, if it fails because the problem wasn't really worth solving, or the customers were not willing to pay, pivot. And be happy that you failed fast. Because thanks to that relation, thanks to that partnership, you might be able to succeed faster. Thank you very much. May the force be with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bart Bellers. I cannot say anything because this stage is yours. You deserve one more round of applause. Everyone, could you please give a big hand of applause to him once again? Yes, indeed, he inspiring us a lot. 1,000 times we failed, but only one time we succeed in this startup industry. But we can be a hero in our mind. และสำหรับ